all running, needing electricity. They're demanding electricity to run. Plus, we're going to need electrical shielding because the magnetosphere is dying. We're going to need some, basically space weapons. Of course, we'll first aim them at each other because that's the nature of our Velikovskian uh, amnesic delusion. And there's a kind of a guilt complex. That's a religious guilt complex. We think that we caused the catastrophe, and now, ironically, we might actually cause a catastrophe. But then after that, we'll actually aim these weapons out and hit the asteroids and hit the whatever and defend ourselves. The only way we're going to do that is harnessing natural energy in a free flow environment using Birkeland currents. That's the only way.
I got to break in and ask you something now.
Yeah, go ahead.
What do you think is going on with Haarp?
I mean, it's a limited. People should watch because he does a much better job than me. The channel Curious Droid. He has a whole video on Haarp. It has a specific. That project has a specific function and a specific range, and it can only reach so far. Again, because it is a antenna device that pushes. Now, are there resonant frequencies that would? Yeah, I think that's possible. I think it's possible that quite accidentally. You remember that old joke, Uncle Joe, if he has the metal plate in his head and you turn on the microwave and then he starts, tap dancing. It's an old joke from the middle of the 20th century that's been, played out. Is in Christmas vacation movie. Okay, I think that that's possible. I think that your DNA could have accidental resonance with CERN or Haarp or the power lines outside your house. I'll tell you this. I was walking in a Home Depot one time, and there was how the ceilings are way vaulted, right, 30 feet up, right? There was a fluorescent light that was buzzing, and as I approached it, the top of the crown chakra on the top of my head started to electrify. I knew a feeler bolt was reaching out up from me towards that outlet, even though I'm not the nearest connection, right? I mean, it has all that metal above it that would connect it to ground. It had immediate circuit, but there was a feeler reaching up from my crown towards that fluorescent and one reaching down. And I was a little afraid, but then I was like, there's no way it's going to arc over 30 feet to zap me. But, that kind of stuff can happen, and which resonant frequencies can be alike, and maybe like a cell phone or even just bad words, people having bad thoughts about you. And there's been a lot of research, a lot of experiments done like this, where they have like all the people in the room, they think a bad thought about you and it makes your arm weaker. That stuff's real. But that is a whole different thing than saying one person in the room spins a hand crank generator and it causes you to get cancer 100 feet away. That's not how that works. The issue is how much throughput you can actually generate with that power. And with nature, nature generates power so easily that there's always not only enough to waste, and waste is of course used up through other means in nature. We hate waste, and we strive for efficiency, but nature doesn't do that. It wastes lots of energy. Nature is incredibly inefficient, and for good reason, because then it supports more life and more potential successes. But nature, through almost no effort at all, can generate massive power. Think about this: the thunderbolt that hit here in Versailles, Kentucky. It was almost certainly a single stroke, because we have 56 craters, just like the posts over there at Stonehenge, right? 56, but they're in an octagon. And the biggest crater I measured was about 200 feet wide. But there's no trailing, there's no carved out material like the Grand Canyon or anything like that. Looks like a single stroke. That was probably generated when the moon first approached us from Jupiter. And all it had to do was the two magnetospheres rub by each other, and that probably generated enough electricity in the ionosphere to create a Paratondian thunderbolt, just as he simulated in lab. And that's not effort. It's not like the moon's quote trying anything. It's not pushing. It's just moving. It's just rearranging. It's as natural as anything. Some of the most devastating punches in boxing come from not trying. I actually treated a woman whose son had died. So when she came in, she had an aura that was very vibrating incredibly fast, and she was very anxious. And her whole life had gone downhill. She had had an affair and ruined her marriage. This poor woman. Here's the story. Her son, when he was a senior in high school, got into a fight on the soccer field, and the other kid punched him in the carotid and gave him an accidental death touch, which in the Western medicine they just call carotid disintegration syndrome. He was dead within 2 weeks because, of course, in the West, they don't know anything about death touch or reverse channels, circuitry that's not flowing correctly, any of that kind of stuff. Well, it was completely by accident. Nobody it was not a pre-planned situation. It was a random punch. Yeah, it was pushed, but it was the strike of it. There was no training. These are just hothead kids having a punch out, normal slugfest, good old American high school slugfest on the field. And one happened to strike the electrical point at stomach 9, which is a vagus nerve connector. And if anybody out there, if you practice as your hardest, most effortful punch, but nature's like that all the time. It's not trying to create tsunamis. It's not trying to create rogue waves or hurricanes. Those things are incidental. They are just emergent properties of the ether.
In baseball, you're taught to just connect, just meet the ball.
Exactly. No mind, right? No mind. Yeah, of course, the samurai guy, you can watch Stanley Superheroes. The guy actually, with the blindfold on, cuts the pellet with his aido, which is a quick draw. Well, that ai concept is this, sudden knowing. We have to attain energy capability like that, but it's going to be very difficult if we imagine that by pushing we can create force that can then be used, of course, to harm each other.
Have you ever seen the guy who can allegedly start a fire with his chi?
Yeah, but you got to understand that. So I've met that guy, and he was on the Guinness World Records show. So there's 3 things about his act. First of all, number one, he does actually project chi, and that man, he went through hell. He was imprisoned by the Chinese Communist Party back in the 70s. He was in prison for like 18 years. So he's a lovely man. Number 2, there is a traditional kung fu side street tradition of mixing kung fu physics with the magic prestigiatorium showmanship. That's normal, and they don't consider it a moral conundrum. And then number 3, that's a chemistry trick. So they use a chemical on the paper, and it does that. But he really can project chi. I've actually felt it. He was like a 82 out of 100. He was pretty good. Very nice man. Very nice man.
Didn't seem like a charlatan.
No, but they don't consider it. In China, you're not a charlatan because you know some magic tricks or you know how to apply leverage and pressure to cause a spear to break. Okay? That's not considered to be a charlatan. Now, as putting the chemical on the paper, that's up to you, to decide. Now, the other guy that people should look at, the guy DJ, 2 things to say about the what's it called? Was it Long Pie? I'm trying to remember anyways, it's a school that came because of the DJ guy. So some Westerners, once they met him after that video came out, they actually begged him to teach, and he did. And then he regretted it, and it caused all sorts of problems. Well, the first, Mopai, that's it, Mopai. The thing is, DJ died young because of the incorrect practice. But what he was doing was real. He was generating electricity in his fingertips through the internal circuitry of the body. And he was 100% legitimate that way. He still did a few, what do you call, prestigiatorium, because that's part of the culture. It's not considered an unethical thing to do. But he showed off his, quote, powers. And,
he was.
you know, for whatever reason, he died young. I mean, you could see, when you see his eyes, so he's a healer, right? Because he was using the internally generated electrical chi to move people's and to improve their health. When you look at him, you could tell he's completely unhealthy and he's already dying. Actually, by the time they make that documentary, when you look at him, he is in Chinese medicine, we would say he's dead already.
Yeah, he said something about his master was furious, even in that show.
Yes, but he also meant the spirits.
So he died. I didn't know.
He did die. Yeah, as far as I am aware, that he died. Now, did he die because he was a smoker? Did he die because of the chi? I can tell you that he was dying. That's all that matters. In the Chinese sciences, it doesn't matter how the ether gets you. It's just that it gets you. It could be like, you know, Patton wanted to die on the battlefield and he got hit by a car, you know. But was he hit by an accidental car or was it CIA? No one can answer. It doesn't matter. In Chinese sciences, that doesn't matter. In our mental way of thinking, it matters.
You know, it was a fender bender. Everybody else.
Yeah, well, that's what they say. That's what they say. But again, was it planned or was it not planned? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In the Chinese sciences, that doesn't matter. Your destiny in Taoist traditions is determined by whether or not you have Tao. So when they looked at the cosmic plasma streaming between the planets, they said, "Oh, that's Tao," and they noted that the power generated by the thunderbolt, by the Lord, to create that thunderbolt, generated of itself. It did not require him to be drained afterwards, which was part of the reason why, after they created that religion and that monotheistic tradition, when Saturn fell, it was pretty dismaying because everything, you know, that you're based on. So when Jupiter pops into the scene, no matter that it's not a cosmic, you know, a pole that sits in the celestial pole, Jupiter wanders. Of course, we know this. Zeus wanders all over the place, sleeps with all the demigods and the mortals and everything, and fights battles, and you know, is later on instigator of many heroic stories. But for us, it was a dismaying thing that this god wouldn't sit still. In fact, the Sumerians, I think I read, maybe it was Velikovsky, mentioned that they would withhold food from the god to try and get it to stay in the sky. Which is, it's kind of funny if you think about it. It's like humans really, again, back to the power scale thing, we imagine more control and capability than is realistic. And we need to get serious because we've done some things that may have serious consequences. We don't know the rules of electricity. We don't know when things ripple in this singular universe. Is there a ripple in other dimensions? Is there a ripple across time? Is it something that can be detected instantly on an alien planet? Do we signal? As again, Liu Cixin, he talks about this dark forest theory. Are we the species proclaiming in the middle of the forest, "I am man, come and, you know, fight me"? We don't know that. We also don't know the toxicity thing. So this goes back to the invisible rainbow. Do we have a problem with, obviously it wasn't a huge deal when we have just radios, but now we have 5G, and I assume that we'll go to 6G. And so we keep pushing, again, this concept that we have the power, so we're going to force the universe to respond to us without an understanding of ether. We are using the ether, which I call the PEM, plasma electromagnetism. We are using it without knowing all of its rules, and at the same time denying that it exists in its own pure state. Right? We have no official Michelson-Morley experiments that I've ever heard of that have been published in mainstream journals going in the vertical. All of them are horizontal, Michelson Morley, and we just can keep convincing ourselves there's no ether, and then turning around and calculating it and going, well, there must be, look at all this energy must be in the void. Well, there has to be a consequence, right? For every action, equal and opposite reaction. There has to be a consequence for us. Obviously, there's a consequence. The nature is keeping score. If we burn fossil fuels, which they're probably not fossil fuels, but they're fuels. If we burn fuel to make electricity, which Tesla said was barbaric, even then, what is the consequence for that? Secondly, when we rotate magnets around a copper coil and we push the electricity through, does it rob the environment of necessary energy for life? And for that matter, is oil, which is a lipid, part of what makes nature rich and I guess you would say flourish. For example, here in Kentucky, we have a wonderful biodiversity and a wonderful geology. A lot of it is electrically carved. And there happens to be also oil and natural gas here. Are those two things related, or three things related? I contend probably that some kind of Gaia effect of needing lipids. By draining off the lipids, are we endangering ourselves? These are things that we haven't thought of because we refuse to look at secret sciences like nonlinear dynamics and take them to their full effect. There's a whole host of these secret sciences from the 20th century that are not taught in they're certainly not taught in high schools. They're not taught to undergrads. When I went through, there was no nonlinear. There was the first time I saw a nonlinear mathematics course be offered as an elective. It was my senior year. I couldn't get in, and it's just not a common thing to teach. And we may be on the cusp of seeing the ramifications of that, and coronavirus just being one of the examples of, you lock this down and look what all this other stuff happens at the same time. And nature may challenge us if we can't appropriately use consciousness to understand what she is teaching. Is my thesis here. Maybe you agree, maybe you disagree. I don't know.
I just find it really interesting. It's a new avenue for me.
I kick things in and gnaw on them for a while. No.
Well, I definitely encourage you to look up operations research because you have an interest in World War II. So that's a secret science that came out of World War II. That wasn't some German torture.
Operations research.
Yeah.
I looked at a little bit of it. Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah.
And then nonlinear dynamics, of course. Most people here who are listening they're unintentionally aware of it. Whereas most people just talk about fractals. But probably the best is the Ian Malcolm character in Jurassic Park. And, Michael Crichton was one of those guys who I think a little bit tapped into the future. And he made the argument a long time ago that he made the argument in The Lost World, which is the sequel to Jurassic Park, that the internet was our civilization's Tower of Babel. The complexity theory basically entails that problems will and must arise because of the incredible amount of complexity and unforeseen circumstances, things that go beyond your control, that will express themselves one way or another.
Yeah, well,
and
at least we got the internet to talk about it on.
I know, well, but positives, negatives, right? So that's the positive. What are the negatives? If we continue, you can do that. I like going out on boats, but I am cognizant every time I go out on a boat that when I burn the fuel, it's going into the water. That hurts the fish, but also long term, that fuel and that acid that's in the water now gets into my water that I drink. Right? And that's the kind of thinking. That's what I'm saying. We have to be a little bit more cognizant of the pros and the cons, the yin and the yang. That the ancients all knew about. All the world knew about yin and yang. probably it was a plasma shape in the sky, but certainly it's a self-explainable thing. You go on Wikipedia and they say it's like some kind of pseudoscientific metaphysical bunk, right? And of course, that's nothing could be further from the truth. The law of polarity is, and it's one of the 8, and they're acting at all times.
There it is. Greatest power in the universe. Everyone pretend you don't notice. We live in this new world of pretend you don't see.
The polarity is a big one. Polarity is a big one. And you know what sits opposite polarity is relativity.
Hey, I want to ask you a question. This is something that I've often wondered. Now you have positive and is the negative electricity magnetism, or is it?
Okay, so yin and yang is not like yang is not equal positive and yin is not equal negative. Yin yang it's like mammal and reptile. You have a lot of things underneath of it. Okay, now positive and negative. Positive is yang, and negative is yin. But in electricity, it's actually the opposite. The electron is yang, and the proton is actually yin. But Benjamin Franklin just got them backwards, which is fine. Yeah, it's just okay. It's just how they interact in the body. So now ask your question again. Is positive?
Well, positive. There's positive electricity. Obviously, must be going to the right, and negative is going to the left, or vice versa. But I often wondered: is negative electricity what is magnetism, or does it take both of them?
Oh. So now, electricity and magnetism are a different yin and yang. That they're neither positive nor negative. Both have poles within them. This is the concept of infinite divisibility. Yin and yang is infinitely divisible. So you have the positive and negative, and you have the north and south pole, but either way, it's still yin and yang. So the yin and yang both split into yin and yang.
Well, you know that business with antimatter. I'm just kind of wondering, what is that really? It can't be antimatter. There's no such thing. It's another byproduct.
Well, I mean, it's from what we can tell from the law of polarity, which again, the law of polarity sits opposite relativity, and they're both very difficult to define and to encapsulate. The law of polarity, of course, corresponds to fire or plasma, whereas the law of relativity to water and fluids in general. But because it's very difficult to actually define and to encapsulate and to entirely know, we can only inductively make reasonable assumptions about the totality of yin and yang. We can't actually know all the different properties of yin and yang. But one thing that we can figure is if we're seeing something, there must be its so-called antithesis or its polar opposite. And so, now I can't go out and prove that there is a spouse for every person born. But I think that, we tend to believe it. I mean, look at the movie Natural Born Killers. I mean, who knew, or real life, Bonnie and Clyde. I mean, for every psycho, there must be a polar psycho to match. I don't know. I mean, I can tell you this. I can't think of a single thing that doesn't have yin and yang. Can't think of anything.
Right.
So,
have you heard of the
antimatter makes sense.
Battle for Los Angeles in 1942?
Yes. And I think that they saw something, but it could have been plasma. Who knows what it could have been? Could have been a weather balloon.
Isn't it interesting, though, that when they have the spotlights on it, when they do the reverse thing, it looks like a damn spaceship. It looks like a damn flying saucer.
Yeah, I mean, hey, I can't disprove, I can't disprove.
They fired
aliens.
They say they fired 1,400 rounds at it, and nothing happened. Here's the thing. Something is going on. I don't necessarily want to believe that aliens are visiting, but something is.
But
Here's the thing. Okay, we know UFOs are real because we have video footage of them now that has been confirmed as real video footage,
Yeah.
but we don't know what it is. We
Yeah,
can't
the
we
name-
can't figure it out.
they
The
admitted
thing
to it.
is, though, we also did you know that the Cherokee Indians had a story about Bigfoot before the white man came here, but the Cherokee version of Bigfoot could disappear and reappear at will. As in, there may be because of the property yin and yang, there may be a parallel or like a coin, the opposite side of the coin to our universe. We may just have occasionally, because of electricity or because of something, maybe the sun does something. Let's say the sun changes electrical behavior for a day. We've seen that. The sun has dropped its solar wind for a day, and it's doubled its solar wind or exceeded near to the speed of light sometimes. And without effort, by the way, the sun does that, no effort. It doesn't cost it any kind of, it doesn't have a sick day the day after because it nearly went the speed of light. So if that happens and it changes the electrical property, and that could induce the quarks to behaving differently, we might see things that we normally wouldn't see. I mean, we just don't know because we don't have enough data. At one time, ball lightning was considered a fable. We now have scientific data surrounding it. Most things that were considered impossible or unreal when I was a kid are now coming real. And then some of the things that we thought were real are now totally redefined. You know, like the classical black hole. When they made that movie, The Black Hole, it was still like an object, and it was the size of a period at the end of a sentence, and it was infinitely dense and all this stuff. Well, those have been debunked. That's all rubbish. And they teach it still, but it's still rubbish. Now we know it's the opposite. There doesn't seem to be anything there. It's a non-physical radii, and it's ejecting everything. It's not sucking things, and it's ejecting everything. And it has incredible mass, but not infinite mass. And they do give a diameter size to it, but they call it a non-physical radii. But so the whole science is flipping on its head. And if things are always flipping on their head, it's hard to make any concrete assertions. So to say that ether can't exist, when we calculated the energy in the void and the cube of the void, I mean, you can look that up. That is they will tell you, you go to Wikipedia, ether doesn't exist. It's been, disproven by Michael Sporley. But then you can go and you can look up void energy, vacuum energy. They will give you the calculation. Physicists with careers will give you that calculation. And then relativity theorists will pretend that space-time is not their ether.
I know.
It's all word games. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. There's someone famous once said they break it all down into words and then talk about the words.
Yeah, I can't remember. I know the quote. Wasn't that? I remember that. I think. Well, Thornhill covered that quote, or maybe the Space News guy covered that quote once. Dowdy, yeah. I mean, it's
Dollar.
Oh, dollar. Yeah, they. Again, the proper use of applied consciousness, huge this day and age, is really, other than time, probably our most limited resource. Applied consciousness.
Applied consciousness.
Yeah, we used to call it wisdom, but apparently wisdom is, a faux pas. You're not allowed to talk about wisdom. You can't use wisdom in government and wisdom in judge rulings, and people don't want to use wisdom anymore. It kills me whenever a police officer gives a ticket. It's been a few years since I saw this, but it happened a bunch in a row. Police officers giving citations to little girls with lemonade stands. And I'm thinking, how pitiful do you have to be inside yourself to do something like that? Well, that's a lack of wisdom, or in this case, we're calling it applied consciousness. We want to be engineer-like.
As long as it has a rational end, it has to be.
Well, that could get you too. I mean, have you ever seen Dr. Strangelove? I mean, that's a very rational movie.
Oh yes, I love that movie.
Dr. Strangelove, very rational. rational to the point of insanity.
Curtis.
I mean, it's sort of like communism.
That's
You can create equal wealth, but the wealth is equal poverty. So everybody's equally miserable. Not exactly irrational. I mean, it is rational, but it's completely insane. Applied consciousness would also include our imagination. It would include our thoughts, our feelings, our dreams, in our inductive reasoning as well as our deductive reasoning, because an obsessive use of deductive reasoning is how we got to where we are, which is a good statement and a bad statement. You know, my children certainly love our house has always enough calories and it always has enough like toys, which almost all these toys I'm looking at, it's like a sea of petroleum in this living room.
Did you watch The Way yet?
Did I watch what?
The Greek Way. I just put it out today.
Oh no, I haven't. I really haven't been. I had clinic today, so I haven't been.
Get a chance, check it out.
Okay, I will. So, but the thing is that we don't know.
I'll talk to you about it after.
After what?
You're gonna have thoughts after you see the video.
Oh, okay, yeah. After I see it, I'll let you know. The children that I have, they have plenty. Mankind is in the same position. We have all this plenty, and yet we have a difficulty in fair and equitable distribution, and also appreciating merit. And we don't know the ramifications of that. So now with my children, I can apply wisdom, and I can take away a toy or take away a candy, like it's post Halloween, right? So there's a plethora of cheap energy in the house. I'm like Saudi Arabia over here. I got a plethora of cheap energy in the house.
You live in Kentucky, right?
Yes.
And now, how far are you from Albany? My mom was born in Albany.
Oh God, that's got to be at least 8 hours. I mean, or more. Maybe
you're on the other side of the state. I think. The top.
Well, I'm in the more or less the center of Kentucky, but I mean, you got to drive across. You got to drive through Ohio, Pennsylvania.
East or west side?
You would go east. You would go northeast from here. But realistically, you have to either go north or you have to go east. There is no over like that. So you gotta go over to Maryland basically, and then go north through Pennsylvania up to Albany, New York. It's not there's no triangle. There's no hypotenuse there.
Is Kentucky a dry state still?
Dry. The state of making bourbon. This is the home of bourbon.
I'm telling you, when I was there, it's like 1987. It was.
There are some counties. No. The whole state was not dry.
No.
There are counties. Yeah, there are counties, but of course they just always have right on the edge of the county. There's always a last chance liquor.
Oh yeah, I was 6 miles from the Tennessee state line, so I just went over the state line.
Yeah. There's always there are individual counties that pretend, but these days it's all the drugs. Forget about the alcohol; it's the drugs, man.
Right. Well, pot is a lot. No, it's a lot.
I'm not worried about pot. I'm talking about meth. I'm talking about narcotics. I'm talking about cartels. I mean, we
get a lot of burners there, huh?
You know what they didn't talk about in any of the. I don't want to get into any politics, but there's mention
talk about
in any of the debates. No one talks about the cartels, the meth, or the drug problem in America. It didn't come up once, which blows my mind because in the 80s and the 90s, it was a consistent political hit point to talk about that. And listening to Tom Clancy novels, because I'm crazy like that, I watch all the stuff and I listen at the same time. I mean, it's so central to the plot, especially, of course, of Clear and Present Danger. It blows my mind that you can have so many people who are so despondent and disconnected from anything real because they don't have a spiritual connection that is helping them, that is working for them right now. And of course, the chemicals are very addictive, and then nobody talk about it. It again, lack of applied consciousness. And in this case, people know about it, but they don't apply the consciousness of empathy, compassion, and love.
Mhm.
To me, it's unconscionable. But then again, it's just a long list of problems. All of them, according to the Chinese, come from not being with Tao. Having Tao was, again, that was the ancient word, of course, was derived out of what they saw in the sky, from heaven. But this concept of the way, of this energy that moves itself, because that's when you read the Tao Te Ching, it's what it talks about, is that it moves itself. And we have not applied that in our modern society, and we limit how our consciousness flows. We turn it off. And I'm just as guilty as anybody. I'm not judging any one individual person. I am that guy though that gives the $5 to the man on the subway in New York, and everybody else is like, "Oh God!" But you know what? That guy left me alone. He went and yelled at someone else. I mean, I figured it was, I didn't need it, and he needed it. So energy exchange, right? Yeah, but the people that live there are thinking, guys, you're not making the situation any better. And I get that. It's not a solution, a permanent solution. So the same thing with the drugs. We've got to apply our consciousness. And to do that, that's going to require energy and effort. I have a patient, and she confided in me today. She somehow has, after saving 1 or 2 suicides, she somehow now gets feelings, and she just can tell. And she recently saved one who had texted her and just sounded weird. And because she didn't think, oh, how they're being weird, so I'll ignore it. You know how people, they screen their texts, they screen their calls because we're inundated by connection. Well, she didn't. And she looked at this thing, and she could tell that he was not in his right mind, or he or she. And then they went and saved their life. And so she's saved 6 suicides. And she's not a professional at it or anything. She just cares. All it takes is connection. All it takes is, applied consciousness.
There are so many good souls out there.
Oh, she's a great soul, which is why she's always in pain. The reward. You know what they say, no good deed goes unpunished.
No good deed goes unpunished.
No good deed goes unpunished. That's the absolute truth.
I was looking for, while we were talking, I was listening, but I was looking for this video I have, and I was going to share it with you. But are you on your phone or?
I am. I wouldn't be able to see it really.
Well, you know what? When I find
my phone's
it,
almost dead.
Yeah. Well, we can wrap it up whenever you.
Well.
But so I know we're going to have a nice recording.
You had a video,
Mr. Short-term Memory here.
I assume you'll post the video on your.
Yes,
on your channel.
The video. There's these like really strange electric signals coming from Antarctica, and they're saying that they're really powerful. Now, I was listening to Cliff High. You know who Cliff High is? He has this machine that collects what he calls woo-woo, but it's chatter on the internet, and the words that are being used, that
people pick up, right?
He can find out something's happening from that. That might have something to do with what you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, no, it's 100%. People, there is some kind of ripple, and we connect to it, and we aren't appreciating how we're connected to it. The Taoists appreciated it. I certainly use it. I'm not going to go into a lot of description of that because that's not only private, but I'll give you a story that illustrates why I don't give away some of the secrets. I had he was an Italian kid. He was about 25 years old, and he was coming into the Taoist group back when I used Facebook and ran the Complete Reality group. And he was hot for Taoism. He was just super hot for Taoism, and he was having a hard time getting connected to the community. And so I decided to give him my time during clinic on a Tuesday, on a Tuesday, and I decided to give him some of my expertise, and then he did what was the problem. He replicated the problem, which is he went beyond, and what he was doing apparently wherever he was in Europe, Italy, or something, he was making these Taoists uncomfortable because it's a faux pas to ask questions. So he asked a question that was rather pointed, and he wasn't disrespectful, but it was information I was not allowed to give him yet. And I was on the verge of typing to him, that question is not the proper question for the stage you're at. And the whole computer was shut off. And so I rebooted it, and I got back on, and he was like, "Hey, what happened?" And I was like, "Well, I wanted to let you know, and I wasn't going to answer your question. And the reason is but also heaven didn't want you to know either." And he got really frustrated, and he was like, I could feel the energy across the chat. And he was like, "Why doesn't it want me to know?" And he was very frustrated because he has trying so hard. But there was a block in his karma. And I have no idea if it's something he did in the past or a past life. I couldn't tell you. It could be an attitude problem. Could be he just wanted to have dark secrets because he wants to manipulate people. There are people like that. They study, they'll study a black magic text so that they can try and hurt people.
Energy vampires.
They're the energy vampires, but also some people just want power.
Yes. And they're hateful.
Yeah, but he didn't seem hateful. I just didn't know. It was just improper. It was the improper time. And so the ether decided to shut the computer off, and I mean like lightning. And I knew instantly, as soon as it did it, I actually felt a ripple from the beyond space that told me that I had more or less a watcher who was just like, oh, it was afraid I was actually going to give. So there was no trust. There's no trust. And I can tell you, I did have a being enter my in a dream space, and I became lucid because he entered my childhood home, which is a symbol of like a sort of sanctuary for your inner child when you're dreaming. He entered in and sat down like he owned the place, and then told me he was there for the transition, and then the dream unfolded, and it was a prophetic dream. But I can tell you, I have no love for that guy. I don't know who he is, and he might be a really good guy, but I just don't like the attitude. I didn't like the attitude of this. It was very pompous, just like waltzed into my childhood home in my dream world, sat down like he owned the place, and just refused to answer the question beyond some kind of cryptic words. And, I more or less decided I didn't like the guy. So we'll see if I ever meet him again in the space. But these spaces that we can tap into, it might be because of the nature of the mind, the nature of the brain. It might be because DNA is an antenna. I couldn't tell you the answer to that. Everybody's got a different opinion. Graham Hancock has an opinion. Elliot Dollard's got an opinion. Walt Thornhill's got an opinion on it. Yeah. No one's got any answers. All I can tell you is I have a circuit model for the channels. And if those channels are in the brain, then that would imply antennas in the brain. But the circuit model is not a literal model. It's just a model it's a symbology of the elements that are inside the body. I did see an article fairly recently on like phys.org or something about how consciousness has been proven to be electromagnetic. But realistically, we don't know what we don't know. We really just don't. And that's maybe not a bad thing if you look at the state of consciousness abuse right now. The most abused substance in the world is consciousness.
Yeah. At least we're free.
Well, yeah. I mean that's a whole new can of discussion right there. We better.
Well, we have liberties and rights, and we're not subjugated to some despot.
Well, if you get philosophical, somebody that's going to come up. People are going to dispute what you said.
Well, I know, but I'm just saying, hey, man, today we got it made compared to what.
Oh yeah, there's no doubt. Compared to the days of plunder economy, Yeah, the plunder economy, the lack of a free enterprise.
Mhm.
A lot of people are really deluded. They think Scandinavia is socialist. It's hilarious. Scandinavia is, of course, free enterprise, just the same as we are.
Yeah.
And people don't
Wait.
realize the difference between a free enterprise system and a state planned economy, and the difference of efficiency. Because can you imagine if you had to manage what happened to each individual leaf in your yard, each individual grass blade, each individual anthill,
Mhm.
and which ants are going to get fed today?
Right.
That's dumb, right?
Yeah.
So the free enterprise is obviously clearly superior way, but we haven't figured out how to evolve our human systems to match the incredible implications of that natural system. And that's a real issue. We don't know, by the way, mankind was modern, biologically speaking, 200 to 250,000 years ago,
Mhm.
but mentally only 40,000 years ago. So between 250, we'll call it, and 40,000 years ago, how much of that time was spent screwing up, figuring out how to have a modern biology in a nature system and not, say, wipe out your entire culture? There are cultures that figured that equation out. The Sami people have a culture that they only have to burn down the village every once in a while, and then the culture lasts 3,000 years. It doesn't mean there's no murder. Doesn't mean there's no violence or domestic violence. Doesn't mean there's no racism. But it does mean that they had a stable culture for 3,000 years. We haven't figured that out yet in a modern context. And there are rules for this stuff. We just don't, we don't get it. And as the saying goes, the beatings will continue until morale improves.
Right.
Nonlinear dynamics will keep on whooping us until we start to get it. These electronics, there is a proper context, and even for children having electronics. But we now know, and it's hard to believe that parents aren't aware of this, but that's maybe the fault of the media, or maybe it's the fault of doctors, pediatricians, not telling them. We now know if you give kids their own phone, you're going to activate the same regions of the brain as cocaine. So you create addiction. That is a problem. You can't do that to a child. That's child abuse. If you just gave a kid sugar all the time, or if you gave him cocaine, that's child abuse. So it's the same thing. But there must be a proper use, of course, for electronics. We just haven't figured it out. We will, or the beatings will continue until morale improves.
Yeah. Anomalous energy waves coming from Antarctica. 8/12/17.
Did you say NAMOS? N-A-M-O-S?
Anomalous.
Anomalous. Okay.
Anomalous energy waves
Yeah.
coming.
Yeah, that could be generated by. It could be generated by magma gyres. Who knows what's generating that? And I don't know if it's that important that we absolutely know it. Our obsession with predicting our own demise might be the cause of our own demise. You know what I mean?
Right. Cliff High was saying that they must have found some kind of ancient technology down there, and they're messing around.
That doesn't mean no. See, that's an example of improper use of causation correlation.
Mm-hmm.
You can't jump to conclusions like that. That's like Michael Tellinger finding some stones on the ground.
Well,
now I've shown that the Baconi and Maputo, those sites that Tellinger's all about, have to do with the demise of our star and its splitting. Okay, but he finds them, determines that they're really old, and goes, well, it must be aliens. Well, why in the world would aliens care about putting stones in a circle? It doesn't make any sense. Right. It's irresponsible. It's a pseudoscientific application. I can't disprove aliens, but I can certainly say that is not the best way to go about creating a scientific hypothesis.
Well, when Kerry and all those people went down to Antarctica, he says that's the reason. Because this woo-woo machine, it worked a couple times, but it's probably just lucky. I don't know.
Who knows? I mean, there's a lot of unverified things out there. Mail.
There's got to be something.
MEYL. He has a scalar wave machine that uses Tesla coils. Again, though, I don't have one. I haven't verified it myself. I'd love to get the time, the data to do. The only verification, though, I care about at this moment, aside from the medical stuff that I ever work on, I want to get down to Costa Rica and continue my simplest math in the world, the polar and equatorial diameter ratios for those stone spheres. And I bet you they will all match a body in the known solar system.
Say that again.
Okay, you know the giant stone spheres in Costa Rica?
Yes.
Okay, and throughout Central America. I bet you if I continue my work of polar to equatorial diameter ratios that I've been doing, that we could find every solar system body in the stone spheres.
I think you're right. I think you probably would. Yeah.
Yep.
I can see that happening.
Pretty sure.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of examples of those kinds of things. You know the stone. Have you ever heard of Old Stone Fort in Georgia?
I've heard of it.
Fort Mountain. Okay.
Not really. No, not Fort Mountain.
Fort Mountain. Yeah, it's not an actual fort.
I'm not familiar.
And so both the archaeologists play it down in terms of importance, and then the diffusionists have assumed it's Welsh. It's not Welsh, and it's certainly not a fort, and it's also not as simple as the archaeologists make it. It is a Venus-Mars effigy where they came together, just like at Avebury.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's the same thing, and the way that it comes to a head, there's a hole at the head of the two serpents where a sphere would go. But the sphere's been knocked down or broken long ago. So it's just a divot. It's just a hole there. But all the woo people and then, of course, the archaeologists don't know anything. They think they know, but they don't really know.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine. I mean, you can't. They're almost impossible to make perfectly round like they are. I mean, and what do they fly through the air and maybe they get a global kind of form to them, or when they're molten?
No, they would have hand people back in man. If you didn't have TV and bills and kids, believe me, you'd have enough time to make anything. That's been shown. That's been shown in India and in Mesopotamia, in China.
There's
Ancient people.
Of them.
When you got people and that's all they do for a living.
Mm-hmm. Hey, let's make spheres.
There's no problem. Hey, man, if it's your gods, if that's your gods,
yeah.
And were they not worthy of being gods? I mean, they weren't worthy of being humanized. But if you want to measure a god by the power they project, nothing more powerful than when Venus and the moon came closer to the Earth, and then of course those became the worship of satanic stuff, because of the power of the dark side. And then the epic hero Mars and Jupiter as the creator god.
Reminds me of marbles.
Yeah, except for these marbles. These marbles will rearrange your family, your religion, your farming seasons.
Marbles for giants.
I had a epiphany one day but when I say epiphany, I actually felt my consciousness elevated up a degree, up a couple levels.
Okay.
And I was driving and coming back from, I guess, Illinois or Indiana after, I think it was visiting Garden of the Gods, which is an interesting potential electric thunderbolt, by the way. But as I was driving, I just had this realization that for us, the catastrophes for the gods would be the equivalent of just me kicking over my son's, toy truck over here.
Garden of the Gods.
Yeah, Garden of the Gods, Illinois. There's you some electrogeology. You need to do an episode on the Liesegang bands.
Okay.
Garden of the Gods, Illinois. Yeah.
The Liesegang bands.
Yeah, but to see the
spell that in chat
crater. Oh, yeah. Well, I can tell you right now. It's spelled like lies, Lies, and then Egang. Liesegang.
Okay.
And I have a photo that proves that there was electrical activity happening there, but I can't eliminate a bolide impact. So I think that it was one of those that split, and half of it hit as a bolide, and the other half was electrical explosion, and melted the layers. It's a beautiful place, though.
Yeah,
We
I've
should definitely do
heard
an
of
episode
it, but
on
I've never been there. Yeah.
Well, there's a Garden of the Gods, like Colorado or whatever. That's totally
Yeah, I
different.
think that's what I put it in Garden of the Gods of
Yeah,
Colorado.
no. You gotta look at Garden of the Gods, Illinois.
Okay.
Shawnee National Forest.
Oh, I got it. Yeah. Shawnee National Forest.
Mhm.
It's rocky and
Yeah,
trees.
it's very rocky. A lot of fun to climb on. Safer than it looks.
Looks beautiful. Yeah.
Oh, it's absolutely gorgeous. But there's a crater
Close to it or
right
something.
around there. Like 4 hours, 5 hours.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely worth going to. People get a chance, because whatever happened there was definitely a very energetic experience. And it's a lot of fun. The kids love it. There's camping there and whatnot. I actually was probably supposed to take them back and go camping this fall. I guess I just got lazy. We went to Missouri in the summer, and guess what? Found some Indian carvings, and guess what they were?
What?
All plasma glyphs.
Yeah.
Yeah, thunderbirds and spirals and all the plasma glyphs.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, I stopped these because I'm weird like this. There were some girls there with they were like high school girls with their mom, and I had my two boys, and they're oohing and awing about all the stuff and picking things out, and these ladies appeared to be very interested in the rock art, so I decided to give them a little ad hoc EU lesson. Kind of blew their minds. Of course, then they probably thought it was very, very weird, but it's okay. Somebody's got to do it.
Right.
Listen, my phone is about to die.
All right.
They got seriously on its last leg.
Petroglyphs there, do they?
In Missouri?
Yeah, in Illinois there at the.
There are. I haven't been to those, but I will tell you what there is at the Garden of the Gods. I think that there's a Saturnian and then a Jovian platform, and I haven't proved it yet. But there's this flat rock that looks to me like it was cleared for worship, and one layer of the rock appears to me to be a broken hexagon, and the other one appears to be an octagon. So I got to go back and measure all the ratio segments and compare them with the Jovian and the hexagon of Saturn's pole. But I think it was a worship platform, so I think that they knew it was an electrical event. But again, with there being an actual bow shock there, it does appear that a bolide struck. It doesn't appear to be the most energetic strike. The hills that surround the excavation are only a few hundred feet tall.
Okay.
But definitely it warped the geology. So if it was a thunderbolt, it was one hell of an impact.
I see that. Yeah. Looking at it right now. Hey, you just left. Your phone died.
Yeah.
I hear you. All right. Well, hey, man, I got over 2 hours. Right, 2 hours right on the button.
You're welcome.
Thank you, bro. I appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Man. It was an excellent talk.
I hope that people enjoy it. I really do. And if they find anything offensive, well, too bad.
No, they're cool. They're
No, you have a great audience. So
Yes.
I really appreciate it. And thank you for the kind words that people request to hear from me.
Oh yeah.
Much love to all of you that are out there, and just keep on plugging forward and connecting.
Yep.
All right, man. Have a good night.
Okay, my friend. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
I'll see you. Bye.
That will conclude my chat with Ramon for the evening. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you join me for the next Greg J video. Please like, share, comment, and if you can, donate to help the cause. I hope you're all staying healthy and safe. But that stuff is scary. I always enjoy getting Ramon's point of view. He's a smart guy, and he actually goes out there in the field and does measurements and things. How many of us get a chance to do that? God, I wish I could. Just when you think you got the rat race won, they come up with faster rats. Yep. You know how it is. Right now, I don't know if I want to go anywhere in this atmosphere. But it'll change for the better, I hope. Never fails. Every single time him and I try to talk, something screws up. The last time I lost the entire show. After checking 3 times to make sure it was recording, it just never showed up. And then this time the sound was a little jacked up. I did my best to fix it. I apologize. It's always something. That's probably what I should name the show. It's always something. Please take care. And I'll see you on down the road.